We are now in the last section, number 9, purpose and benefits of segregation of duties and dual control. It is a short topic and there'll be only one question in the exam. From this, it'll be the last question in the exam. So the syllabus is mainly to understand segregation of duties and dual controls. It is also known as separation of duties, SOD in short. In cyber resilience, it ensures that privileges and rules are separated so that they cannot be used to commit fraud or carry out and hide malicious activities. For example, someone applying for a loan and also approving it. Malicious activity is not fully prevented by SOD, but it is made more difficult unless both parties collude to commit it together. This concept originates in accounting, finance, and other regulated industries to provide internal control to prevent fraud and unintentional errors. In fact, the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, SOX, is a good example of a regulation that places great importance on SOD for internal controls. And many of these regulations depend on IT for providing these segregation controls. The key message here is to segregate powerful roles and avoid toxic combinations that can be used to circumvent controls. It should be noted that SOD is an administrative overhead and it should be designed so that it makes the best use of resources and does not negatively impact business processes. In development and operations, let's see how this works. It plays an important role in or part in IT operation and system development to separate their activities. For example, a developer who is responsible for writing code would not have access to the operational IT environment. However, in modern environments such as DevOps environments, developers are also operators and vice versa. So developers will need access to operations and vice versa. And this demarcation becomes tenuous. Even then, it is still an important control that should be considered and applied. For example, developers are expected to do a certain amount of testing as they develop code, but security and user acceptance testing should not be carried out by the developers. The responsibility for final testing should be separated from those who are developing. Developers' access to operational environment, if required, should be managed and controlled. Then we look at the roles and responsibilities and separation of controls. Roles such as network and database administrator or other administrative or support roles such as super users have powerful privileges and need to be monitored. So such combination of these powerful roles into one person becomes toxic because they can be used to reconfigure the network and remove network controls in order to allow access to the database, enabling the person to use their database role to copy and exfiltrate the data from the organization. And if the same person was also the firewall administrator and network and firewall log reviewer, they would have all pervasive control over organization's IT and network to do as they wished because they can even delete entries from the logs. So organizations need to plan and design their privileges, roles, and profiles carefully so as to avoid these toxic combinations. So we'll see some examples here. Organizations should identify all their roles, especially the privileged ones, and map them to processes and document them in a SOD matrix. And then work out which roles need to be segregated from one another. This table or matrix can also be used to design access privileges and access controls. We have this simplified SOD matrix in this example. We have activities such as network administration, database admin, access authorization, audit and review, security management, and programming. And we can see in each row or each entry, for example, if you take up network admin, then network admin is the only role that should be allowed. If you take up database admin, then only database admin should be allowed. And similarly, we have access authorization, then it should be done only by the security manager. Audit and review should be allowed only by the security manager. Security management should be allowed only by the security manager and not the others. Programming, it can be done by the developer and the solutions architect both. So in this table, we can also see here that the security manager, which is the second column, they are able to perform several tasks like access authorization, audit and review, security management. But there also we need caution because it indicates both access authorization and audit responsibility. Therefore, It should be done in separate situations. Then moving on, dual control, where the roles cannot be fully segregated, such as in smaller organizations where there are less people for taking up all the roles. Additional controls will be required to manage risks such as dual control and monitoring and audit. So dual control is a method used to control abuse of privileges. It requires that two or more persons are required to complete a task or a procedure. We'll look at some examples shortly. Monitoring and auditing roles must be separate from those being monitored and audited. The simplest dual control is a managerial or supervisory control. For example, a clerk may be allowed to run small transactions, but a larger transaction will require approval by their manager. So this prevents the clerk from carrying out high-value transactions either maliciously or in error. This sort of control could be required to stop fraud or to stop the clerk making mistakes involving large amounts of money. So we are not giving the approval role completely to another person, but in case of smaller amounts, the clerk may be able to approve. Another example from cyber resilience could be the encrypting of information using two separate encryption keys, each key belonging to a different person to protect information being accessed by just one of the key owners. So dual control is a slight modification of the separation of duties in which the roles are not separated, but an associated task is done by two different people depending on the situation. Then segregation of duties in cyber resilience. Further, for any cyber resilience, the SOD should be designed and implemented to ensure that no single person or entity is able to circumvent, modify, degrade, or abuse any of the security controls to affect confidentiality, integrity, or the availability of information. If they manage to do so, it should be possible to detect it. Then all powerful super users and conflicting roles need to be separate. Conflicting roles are those who can influence decisions and carry out the work. For example, the people auditor should not be also implementing the controls. When such roles take part in access control and authorization, they become really powerful. Then further, the SOD should be the foundation of access control through the implementation of the least privilege principle. So we have seen this earlier. The roles should be segregated so that they have minimum privileges. Uncontrolled privileges and powerful roles can be used to either deliberately or unintentionally cause harm to the system and could violate any or all of the security attributes of CIA. As most regulated environments depend on IT for internal controls, proper control over IT roles becomes more important. So the best practice here are the following. Concentrate on the most risky roles or toxic combinations and separate these first. Then identify conflicting roles such as those who can execute tasks and also approve them. For example, a person implementing the controls and also auditing them. These need to be separated. Take a risk-based approach. Look at risk to sensitive data. Use matrices or tables provided by regulatory bodies to design and build your own SOD matrix. And this SOD should be reviewed as part of the access rights review and annual certification of accounts. So we have seen earlier, for example, the security manager can perform access authorization, audit and review, and security management. But this is the reason why the security manager tasks of access authorization and audit are in conflict, unless the audit has no relation with those authorized accesses.